Welcome to ASMR. Cheers. E4 by Rainn Wilson, who is an actor, mostly known for his brilliant portrayal of Dwight Schrute in The Office. And he's also a keen chess player and has been seen in very good company. Then C5 by Sardoche, playing black. Sardoche is a very big League of Legends streamer. He's a very good League of Legends player, and also he's a keen chess player. Knight F3, played by Rainn Wilson in the first game of the finals of the PogChamps 3 tournament against Sardoche, who plays pawn to e6. And true to the system that Rainn has played throughout the tournament, he plays pawn to b3, and this system e4, knight f3, pawn to b3, with intention of going bishop b2, claiming the long diagonal. That's a system that he has played throughout the tournament. We see knight to f6 by Sardoche. Notice how the knight is looking at the enemy king, because that is where it is going. Now bishop to b2, and d5, staking a claim in the center of the board. The moves we've seen so far are part of what we call chess theory. So these are known moves. They have been studied and recommended by grandmasters. But now Rainn Wilson played the first new move in the game, pawn to e5. Usually the grandmasters would play pawn takes pawn to not allow a strong center pawn, a strong pawn center for black. But now he tried this advance. Sardoche plays queen c7, looking at this pawn, saying, I have two pieces attacking it. Maybe someday I can capture it. Rainn says, oh no, we don't want any of that, and plays bishop b5, pinning the knight to the king. Then bishop d7 by Sardoche, breaking the pin. But Rainn is quite happy to exchange this bishop for this knight, since he no longer has to worry about his advanced pawn. Rainn works to further solidify his advanced pawn with c3. This could look odd, as it blocks the knight from its natural developing square, but Rainn has a very good plan. He wants to play d4, and he wants it to be protected by this pawn. Sardoche plays knight e7, so that he can respond to d4 with c takes d, c takes d, And now knight f5, looking at the base of Rainn's pawn structure. It is well protected by the knight and bishop, but maybe in the future it will become weak. So maybe the knight actually turns from the king and looks a little bit at the pawn here. For now, Rainn castles, getting his king out of any potential trouble. And Sardoche notices that this rook would like to join the game, and it would like to go to e1. So he plays bishop b4, attacking e1. Rainn says, I don't like that. I'm going to kick your bishop. Sardoche says, it's not a problem, and moves his bishop back, maintaining the attack on e1. But the bishop is kicked again and drops back again. So what did Sardoche gain from this little dance of the bishop? So Rainn was able to advance his pawns over here with tempo against the bishop, and the bishop is no longer attacking e1, so the rook can move to e1. But the bishop is now attacking d4, the base of Rainn's pawn center, along with this knight. So with this little maneuver, Rainn has gained control again over the e1 square and plays rook to e1. Sardoche castles, getting his king out of any potential trouble. And Rainn develops his last piece with knight to d2. And in a way, this is where the game begins. So let's take stock of the situation. On White's side, we see Rainn Wilson has developed all of his pieces. He has his king castled to safety here. The king feels pretty snug in this castle. His pawn structure is quite advanced. He has this pawn on e5, spearheading a potential attack, maybe against Black's king. He has these pawns claiming quite a bit of space on the queen side. He has an open file for his rook here on c. But he has two knights and only one bishop. So his light squares are a little bit weaker because there is no counterpart to this bishop. If we look at Black's position, we can see a very nice king, castled snug as a bug in a rock. Also, we can fight for the open c-file. We have a very solid, although not as advanced, pawn structure, but we have no backwards pawns, where this pawn is unable to be protected by another pawn and must rely on heavier pieces for defense. There is no such weakness in Black's pawn chain. Also, Black has the bishop pair, and both sides are doing quite well. I would say the position is probably about equal. We see a very nice move from Sardoche, a5. I believe it's the best move in the position. It's threatening to just capture here, open up the a file where we already have a rook, and try to negate or combat the space advantage that white currently enjoys here on the queen side. Rainn plays knight b3. The knight is coming to c5, where it will be protected by 2 pawns, and it will exercise great influence on black's queen side. We see takes by Sardoche, takes, and then a nice pin, bishop to a4, pinning the knight, so it cannot fulfill its plan of going to c5. The queen moves to d3. From here it is still protecting the knight, but the knight is now free to move because the bishop won't be able to capture a queen on d1. Sardoche says, maybe I should exchange the queens with queen c4 so that I can concentrate on attacking the d4 pawn without having to worry about some sudden checkmating attacks. And Rainn Wilson obliges, but he puts a twist on it. So he plays knight to c5 so that he can recapture, like so. And here we see the first place where Sardoche starts to go a little bit wrong. He plays g5, and the idea is really good. He wants to play g4, kicking this knight. When this knight moves, it will no longer protect d4. There will be 2 attackers and only 1 defender. So what's the problem? The problem is that Rainn is quite a good chess player, and he sees that he can play g4. This stops Sardoche from playing g4, and it attacks the knight. The knight has to move, goes to e7, and now Rainn can capture. If he had captured before, pushing the knight away, he would leave this pawn hanging, and the knight could come in and capture like so, and the position would be unclear. When he included g4 himself, he has now just won a pretty nice pawn. Sardoche is a fighter though, and he does not give up. He goes knight c6, orients the knight to look at d4 once again. Unfortunately, Rainn is just in time with his long prepared knight to c5. This knight is extremely strong, it cannot be tolerated. So Sardoche chops it off. We capture towards the center. Remember everybody, you capture towards the center. And white has a nice position here. He's up a pawn. He has these 2 advanced pawns. This guy is backwards, but we have the bishop to defend and it should be okay. Sardoche goes for an aggressive move, knight to b4, looking at a deadly fork on the rooks. But Rainn sees it, plays rook to e2. And here we see the first serious mistake of the game, because Sardoche plays knight to c2 anyways, and maybe you can see if you can spot what's wrong with this move. Rainn found the solution. It's a tactic, it's a type of tactic called removal of the guard. This bishop is guarding this knight. So if we capture it, and Sardoche recaptures, which is what happened, this guy is no longer defended, so Rainn picks it off. So Rainn just won 2 pieces for the exchange. So this is the position that Sardoche finds himself in. White has a significant advantage, but he has to regroup his forces, and Sardoche tries to stop him. He plays rook a2. This pins the bishop to the rook. And here I must say I'm quite impressed with Rainn Wilson's play, because he finds absolutely the right idea here and plays a very strong move. King to f1, because he sees that now is the time to activate the king and to get him to d3, where he will protect the rook, and d4, because he sees that Sardoche will play rook f to a8, king e2, rook a to a4, and king to d3, just in time to protecting d4 and protecting the rook on c2. Sardoche plays rook b4, attacking the pinned piece. We have to do something about that. Rainn has to do something about that, because he cannot move this bishop easily, and he has a nice way to deal with this attack. He plays bishop to c3. Both rooks are attacked. Sardoche plays rook takes rook. And now it's important that Rainn captures the correct rook. What rook would you capture? I hope it's not b4, because that hangs f2. So Rainn plays king takes c2. Sardoche goes again for the pin with rook c4, pinning the bishop. And this is a mistake, because his strategy is to restrict the movement of white pieces, and with the pin he has somewhat succeeded. But in doing so, he has also severely restricted his own rook's movement, because all these squares that the rook can go to are defended. Only a4 remains as a safe haven for the rook. And if Rainn had played king b3, taking away a4, the game would have pretty much been over right there. Rainn missed it, although he had the right idea, coming back with knight to f3. He wants to go to d2 and evict the rook, but the rook does have an escape square. Sardoche plays king g7, once again allowing king b3, which is once again missed by white. The rook is attacked, and it has an escape square. Now f4 from Rainn, trying to press his advantage over here on the king side. A nice defensive move by Sardoche. King g6, helping out defending f5, and h4 from Rainn. So the situation is quite desperate for black here. It's quite desperate. But Sardoche finds a very resourceful move. It's exactly the idea you need in a position such as this. And he plays h5. Now if we exchange, if white captures, king can capture and can maybe try and eat some of these pawns, and maybe he can get close to a draw. As it were, he got something else instead, because Rainn, who had been playing very solidly and very sensibly up till this point, played somewhat of a head scratcher. He didn't capture with check. He played knight back to its original square, knight to b1. And I must admit that I fail to see the idea. He's protecting the bishop, but the bishop was protected by the king already. So I'm not sure exactly where he was going. And right here, Sardoche could have won the game if he had played h takes g. The point here is that you win a pawn, and this pawn will become passed. It will have 3 steps to become a queen. All pawns dream of becoming a queen. And in order to stop the pawn from advancing, white would have to play bishop back, covering the square. When the bishop drops back, it is no longer defending d4, and we could capture on d4. We would have won 2 pawns, we would have 2 passed pawns, and black would be doing very well. Sardoche chose to throw in this check, and he missed that white could play king b3, attacking the rook, so there is no time to take here. He didn't. He played king d3, and Sardoche played rook to h2, attacking h4. Now Rainn noticed that this stuff is really dangerous, and he thought it best to do something about it. It was high time. So takes with check, king takes, and bishop back to e1, protecting. Sardoche attacked the bishop with his rook. The bishop is pinned to the knight. But the active king here can drop back and protect the bishop. Technically, it would have been better to go to e2, so the knight would have had d2, but it's still sufficient. Sardoche tried to infiltrate with his king, king g4, knight back to c3. Still not very clear what this knight was doing back on b1. King takes. So Sardoche has won a pawn, and if he can get this guy under control, he could draw this game. Knight to e2 check, king to g4. Sardoche was very low on time here, under 1 minute, and the position is extremely difficult. And he has had to find very hard moves for at least 10 moves in a row now. So it is understandable that he made a serious mistake here. Knight to g3, and Sardoche captured the pawn. King takes h4, which of course just hangs the rook. With check even. And the two players continued the game for some moves. Rainn actually managed to chase the king all over the board and checkmate him. But as you can see, between players of this caliber, this game is over. So in the finals of the PogChamps Championship, the 3rd edition, Rainn scored a fighting win with the white pieces and is now up 1 point. So Sardoche will have to strike right back with the white pieces in the next game, or he will lose the final. Let's see what happened. So, through a little bit of movie magic, we have reset the board. Now we see Sardoche on the white side. And he does not play e4 like Rainn, but instead goes d4. This is answered by d6 from Rainn. And we see bishop f4. This is a nice little skirmish in the opening here. Will it become a London system? You know, it's a very flexible, non-committal move that keeps black guessing a little bit as to what opening system white is going to play. Rainn plays g6. We see c4. Now it's not going to be a London. It's looking more like some sort of Queen's Gambit setup. Bishop g7, getting into the fianchetto position on the long diagonal. And knight to c3. b6. Knight e3. Sardoche taking control of a lot of squares here in the center, really pressing his advantage as a white. He gets the advantage of coming in with the first move, and he is really staking a claim in the center, being aggressive here. Bishop to b7. Now we have the double fianchetto, and it looks like black is going for the hippo opening, which would be e6 and the knights here on d7 and e7. Sardoche plays e4. It's a very, very principled way to play this. Just look at all these squares in black's territory that he is attacking. Now pawn to e6, bishop d3, the traditional square for the bishop. Knight e7, knight to e7. Looking to complete the hippo setup. And we saw queen d2 from Sardoche. So Sardoche has all of these pieces extremely well developed, and you can see he has this very nice space advantage, whereas black is like a hippopotamus. These are the eyes that just looking just above the water, and the belly of the beast, like the real power, is just below the water and is ready to strike when it gets the chance. Queen d2 sets up a nice battery here, maybe thinking about putting a bishop on h6. If black were to castle on the king side, we could exchange these bishops and start an attack against the king. Here Rainn deviates from the normal hippo setup with knight to d7 and instead plays knight c6, c6. So what is going on with that? Well, he is attacking d4, and Sardoche defends d4. At least that is what he thinks he's doing. In reality, Rainn could have captured like that. Cannot capture with the queen just yet because you would lose your queen. So knight takes, and here we see the hippopotamus come out of the water and strike with this fork. You see, so we win our piece back with a nice position. That means that in reality the queen is not really defending d4. Rainn did not notice, however, and played queen d7, getting ready to castle on the queen side. Seeing how black would like to castle on the queen side, Sardoche played a small move, a3, quite subtle actually, preparing b4, just trying to come in with all the pawns and all the pieces and just crush black before he gets out of the water. The trick with taking here still works, but the players have not spotted the ideas. Rainn has not spotted the idea and plays long castles. like so. And now Sardoche comes in with b4. And I think maybe Rainn should study up on the theory of the hippopotamus a little bit more, because it seems that he does not understand the idea of these counterattacks against white center that you can get in the hippo. Because if you play this system on only 3 ranks, the first 3 ranks you have here, and you're not trying to mobilize your forces in such a way that you can strike against the center, then you just get hit with what Sardoche is doing here, just so many pieces and so many pawns and no counterplay. If you're not looking at the ways you could play d5 or e5 at the correct moment, for instance here, e5 would be very good. It would attack this bishop. If the bishop drops back, we capture here on d4 with a fork protected by both bishop and knight, forking these 2 pieces. And if you capture, black recaptures. Now you still have to do something about this bishop, and when you do, maybe you drop it back. We can capture here, protected by the rook. So that would have been very good. So in this position, the correct idea is e5, trying to get out of the water, get the huge body of the hippopotamus, the huge powerful body, out of the water. But it needs to get out of the water to attack. Instead, there is a little bit of a head scratcher again from Rainn, as he plays rook on d to c8. And I suspect this has something to do with the fact that Sardoche has moved all these pawns, but has left these 3 in what would be his ideal castle position. And maybe Rainn is thinking, I will have both of my rooks as cannons towards the castle position, and I will then advance with my pawns, get them exchanged off, and then have a nice attack against the king. But if you look at Sardoche's like extremely impressive army here, and how it's attacking your king, then this kind of plan is just too slow. Sardoche marches on, b5, attacking the knight. Knight goes to a5. And Sardoche, I guess he could sense something in the position. He could castle, but he needs to win this game. A draw is not going to cut it. And he can see he has this huge advantage in space. But all the pieces are still on the battlefield, and there are no dents in the hippopotamus's armor. So he strikes with e5. Rainn plays f5. Not worried about capturing en passant. That would benefit him opening up this rook. But Sardoche has other plans. Oh, he has other plans indeed. He recaptures. First blood. And black recaptures. But look at this. There is a dent in the armor now. Sardoche plays rook to d1. And this is, it's not a mistake, but it is inaccurate. Inaccurate. Because you want a rook on the semi-open file towards the king. And he later corrects this. Rainn is not really in tune with just how strong this attack is, so he goes pawn hunting with his knight. Knight b3. It's chased away. Bishop c2. Knight goes back, and maybe he thought, oh, Sardoche could agree to a draw with bishop d3 and knight. We could just go back and forth a couple of times and it would be a draw by repetition. But that's not going to happen in this position. Actually, Sardoche just sacrifices the pawn and castles, which is completely the right idea. After knight takes, we have now a completely open file towards black's king, so that is an absolutely 100% completely justified pawn sacrifice by Sardoche. And actually, it's a two-pawn sacrifice, because the knight is attacking the queen. Queen goes to e2, attacks the knight, and greedily Rainn grabs another pawn. The bishop is attacked, might as well move it out of the way. So Sardoche plays bishop b3, and he has a very, very, very strong position here. It's true he's down two pawns, that's not nothing. But black is under control, and you have white has just a completely safe king, while black's king, he does not feel so good. Rainn tries to break out with knight d5, but now Sardoche gets a chance to correct his inaccuracy with the rook and play knight takes. So that after bishop takes, he can play the very nice Zwischenzug, which is German and means in between move. Rook c1 check. It's a very nice move, and here it was absolutely critical that Rainn played king to b7. That's the only way to stay in the game. And maybe you, if you feel like analyzing this game yourself, you can try and figure out what the difference between king to b7 and king to b8 is. Because he played king to b8 and was met with swift justice. Bishop takes, pawn takes, and now the deadly rook c6. Just an absolutely stellar plan from Sardoche, just identifying the weak spot. It's attacked by the bishop and the rook, and the king is on the very dangerous diagonal here. Rainn thought he had a defense, and it looks nice. Knight to c4. Now the knight defends, and it looks as if this rook is sort of trapped in enemy territory. But here we see a really nice move. Rook to c1. And if you put this in the chess.com engine, it will actually say that this doesn't work, because it fails to see Sardoche's idea. Rainn tries to exchange this rook off and plays rook to c8, also making room for the bishop to come to c8, where it could protect d6. And the chess.com engine says that this position is equal until you force it to consider Sardoche's move, which is rook on 1 takes knight, like so. And the problem is that if you capture with the pawn, we can play either bishop takes with check, or even better, rook takes. This would threaten the queen. When the queen moves, no matter where she goes, we can move the rook anywhere with a check from the bishop and pick up the queen, at least. So when you force it to consider rook takes, the chess.com engine suddenly says, oh, alright, okay, white is winning. So Rainn saw that he couldn't play pawn takes rook, so he played rook takes rook. The problem there, of course, is that this rook have then gobbled up the knight for free. And the threat is renewed. Rook takes or bishop takes d6. Extremely strong. So what will Rainn do? He plays bishop c8, defending. And now actually white could have played knight e5. It's a sacrifice. Pawn takes, but then queen takes check. And there is no defense. It's going to be checkmate. White played instead knight to g5. It's also very strong. It's also winning. And Rainn realized that with the bishop on c8, he can never get this rook out. So he moved the bishop, but the problem, of course, is that the bishop was the only thing guarding d6. So Sardoche cashed in, bishop takes d6, that's check. And every move loses. King b7 loses quite fast because of rook c8 check, fork on the king and the queen, or royal fork, queen takes, bishop takes, king takes, and the coup de grace, queen e5 check. King has to go, somewhere. He moves to e7, and we pick up the rook. So black can get the knight, but if you look at this position, you can see that the queen is a little bit better than the bishop. And like in the first game, they actually played this out to checkmate, but players of this caliber are of course able to reach the correct conclusion, and the correct conclusion here is that white wins. So Sardoche struck back against the mighty Dwight Schrute and managed to get himself into the playoffs. And the playoffs in chess is something called an Armageddon game. Armageddon game. So here we are. The last game, the Armageddon game. The point of an Armageddon game is that there will be a winner. A draw is not possible. Black starts with less time, but if the game ends in a draw, say by threefold repetition, then black wins. Black simply wins. And Sardoche had the black pieces. And since Sardoche had the black pieces, let's do our due diligence and orient the knights to face the opponent's king. That is especially important in this game. And true to form, Rainn Wilson opened up the game with a pawn to e4, and we saw a repeat of the opening from the first game, where Sardoche played the Sicilian defense. Knight f3, e6, and the b3, this system that Rainn Wilson is so fond of. Knight to c6, nothing new yet. Bishop b2 and d5 from Sardoche. If you remember from the first game, in this position Rainn advanced the pawn, which gave him an okay game, but nothing particularly interesting. In this game he improved and exchanged on d5, like so, and played bishop e2. Very solid. We saw knight f6, castles. Very sensible developing moves from both players. Bishop e7, and the humble but effective h3. This just takes away knight jumps, bishop pins that could be possible. It's a nice little move, and white has time to do that in this position. Then castles, and bishop b5. There is no counter pin because he had the time to play h3. So bishop e7, rook on the open file. Rook on the open file, challenging white's control. Knight c3, getting the last light piece of the back rank. And Sardoche is saying, Rainn, you know what? I think you have it a little too easy, getting everything you want. So I will play a6, saying we must clarify the position a little bit. Okay, again, like in game 1, Rainn exchanged on c6. And now he can play d4. Now Sardoche is too smart, he's not going to capture that. That would just free up this bishop. We would get an annoying knight in the center. And Sardoche is very interesting, kind of courageous here, even though he can do with the draw. He does not try to simplify the position. He plays very aggressively with b5. And white tries to reroute his knight. Now if Sardoche were to capture here in the center, we could put a nice knight in the center. But Sardoche plays a nice move, c4. Now this pawn is trapping this bishop a little bit. The bishop does not have a clear view of the battlefield. So a nice positional idea to go past the pawn, create this nice aggressive pawn wedge, cramping white a little bit. White gets out, knight f4. They are currently looking at the center, but they are also a little bit close to the enemy king, so they eye the enemy king also. Sardoche attacks the knight. This bishop is now very nice on this diagonal here towards the king. We are now also opening up the rook on this file, and of course we are attacking the knight. And here Rainn played queen to d2, and that's a bit of a mistake, because Sardoche could have played knight e4, attacking the queen, making things a little bit awkward. Or he could play what he played, queen to c7, also making things a little bit awkward, because now we're attacking this guy twice. So Rainn put something in between, knight to e5, and now Sardoche started looking at the enemy king with this knight, saying, okay, I will go here, I will look at you, Majesty, I'm coming for you, but I'm also looking at the queen, because he's attacking the queen as well. Queen has to go out of the way. And a nice little tactical move here, f6, attacking the knight. And if the knight just moves, say it moves back, well, we can capture the other knight. So the knight captures the bishop. And here, the correct idea for Sardoche would have been to capture this knight, because it wins a tempo against the queen, you see. And then the queen would have to move somewhere, not there, the knight, but queen would have to move somewhere, and when it does, we can capture this knight with our own queen. But Sardoche, feeling the pressure a little bit, captured this knight first. Okay. And its position is still good for black. But white has a little bit of time here. Plays queen f3, trying to get her out of all this nasty business. And here there is black's only real mistake in the whole game, and that is queen to c7. Otherwise, his play has been very, very good, but this is a mistake, because knight captures. Looking at the queen, and the problem is that when the queen moves, we can pick up this knight, because the pawn was defending that. But it ain't over till the fat lady sings. So even though he played pretty serious mistake here, and even though they are playing for $20,000, Sardoche kept a cool head in this position and found a very nice little trick. He didn't move the queen to allow an easy plan for white. Instead, he threw this check. Cannot be captured, it's backed up by the queen. So what do you do? It was absolutely necessary here. Absolutely necessary to go to h1 for white. But Rainn was thinking, I just have to get out of this stuff here so I can get back to what was going on in the center of the board. But chess is played on all 64 squares, all 8 by 8 squares. And there's no such thing as only one part of the board being relevant. So rushing to get back to what he deemed relevant, the relevant feature of the position, Rainn played king to f1. And that's a mistake, because the knight looks at the king. Sardoche leaves the queen, not bothering moving her out of attack, because he has knight to d2. Checkmate. The bishop takes g1. The rook takes e2. The rest of the squares are blocked by his own pieces, and it's checkmate from the knight. So congratulations to Sardoche for an extremely entertaining and well played match. Also congratulations to Rainn Wilson, who played and fought very well. And a big thank you to all of you guys who has watched. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.